Welcome everyone to today's webinar, and we're very thankful to have with us today from KSDE, Natalie Clark and Stacy Smith, who are going to help us dive a little bit deeper into work-based learning and some of the research that went into this before it was approved for a pilot, so that we can really have a much better understanding of the impact I think that this can have, what that pilot is as we begin to expand that. I also want to mention we did have an Advantage Kansas Coordinating Council meeting this week, and one of the things that we talked about was, as we start small and focus really kind of with the idea of almost a pilot project of our own, and then how do we begin to scale that out to other initiatives that will impact all of our economic sectors. We're really zeroing in on information technology, so that IT sector. And so I just want to put that out there really upfront, that how we're going about this. We're really beginning to narrow in on that same idea of a pilot, that we start small and scale it. Work-based learning, starting small and scaling it. But from the full Advantage Kansas, I think information technology will be that thing for us that we think will have the greatest impact in Kansas. And so even through the lens of work-based learning, we can start thinking about, as we scale, maybe we put more focus into the scaling of the IT part of it and then expanding from there. So that's just a little bird walk, but I wanted to get that out there so people don't hear later, wait a minute, you were talking about that this week and didn't share that with us. But without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Natalie and Stacy to really help us dive deeper into work-based learning.
Okay, thank you. Today, Stacy Smith is joining me, and we also have Keith Lawing and Alex Kofod from the Workforce Center in Region 4. So they're going to join us in this presentation also. I have placed a Google folder link into the chat that has the presentation and all of the resources that I'm going to be sharing today. So feel free to open those up as we're talking, and I'm going to show you a little bit about those as we go along. The first thing that I wanted to share today, talking about work-based learning, our timeline and our resources, and how we've gotten to where we are today. We have engaged in several cross-agency collaborative projects. The National Governors Association Work-Based Learning Knowledge Exchange State. We applied to be a knowledge exchange state back in 2018, and we have a cross-agency team. I am the lead for Kansas, and joining me, Stacy Smith. And from each of the different departments, Department of Commerce, we have Mike Bean, Board of Regents, Scott Smathers, and we've had participants from the Department of Labor, currently Angela Berland, and the governor's office as well. Vijay is joining us, and also Dr. Cindy Lane has helped in this initiative. We began with the National Governors Association back in 2018, and we defined some goals that we wanted to move forward with. We wanted to define high quality work-based learning and further define and break that into measurables. We wanted to develop policies and resources to sustain work-based learning. Specifically, we wanted to create a measuring and reflecting student learning, a work-based learning electronic portfolio guidance, and employability skills self-assessment and rubric. We wanted to ask the Department of Labor to develop a one-page liability fact sheet, and that was done by Justin McFarland. Later in the presentation, Stacy is going to show you what that looks like. We wanted to develop strategies to scale young adult participation in high quality work-based learning. And our action item was to develop regional intermediaries. And the fifth goal, the last goal that we had back in 2018 was to communicate the importance of work-based learning as a critical component of the talent pipeline and strategy for connecting young adults to well-paying jobs. And the action item was to raise the work-based learning profile. So we had guidance from Amanda Winters at that time from the National Governors Association. I'm going to show you the document that she referred us to. It was prepared by the Education Commission of States, and it's work-based learning model policy components. So we created our real-world ready work-based learning recommendations based upon those recommendations. We did that in 2019. And then we met with the Education Commission of States, and they gave us feedback prior to going forward when Commissioner Watson was subcommittee chair of the Work-Based Learning Governor's Council on Education, that we forwarded on to the full committee. We have talked a lot about scaling high-quality work-based learning through a pilot. That pilot officially began in January 2020, and it's currently going on. The link within this PowerPoint has updated fact sheets and information sheets as of June 2nd, 2021. So I'd encourage you to explore further and see what's been accomplished in each of those regions. Alex Kofod is going to highlight some of those, but you can see all of the information at that link. We presented the pilot to our State Board of Education, and Jim McNeese said he felt that work-based learning professional development was needed for those work-based learning coordinators in each of the districts. So we invited several agencies listed here: Department of Education, U.S. Department of Labor, Kansas Department of Commerce, Kansas Department of Labor, Kansas Board of Regents, Kansas Department for Children and Families, and the Kansas Association of School Boards. Due to COVID, we had 24 hours of professional development. We created a Kansas work-based learning digital reference guide, which is within that Google folder. And we had approximately 50 participants that represented the phase 1 pilot districts, those 6 districts. We repeated that work-based learning professional development for our phase 2. We had approximately 100 participants in the fall of 2020. So those documents are within the Google folder: the Kansas Work-Based Learning Digital Reference Guide and a Kansas Work-Based Learning Personalized Learning Plan. The Personalized Learning Plan was released in 2019. It was recommended by Mike Bean at the Department of Commerce. He felt that we needed a document that business and industry could utilize to evaluate students in regards to employability skills and technical skills, so that each business partner would be using the same document. And currently we are participating in the National Governors Association as a learning lab state. So due to the pandemic, adapting and using work-based learning as a catalyst for economic recovery. In fact, tomorrow, the National Governors Association is coming to Kansas. We will have Jack Porter and Rachel Hirsch guide us. Some of the items that are on the agenda: agreeing upon terminology based on the U.S. Department of Labor's definition of pre-apprenticeship and Kansas definition of youth registered apprenticeship. Our team will workshop a definition for pre-apprenticeship. We're going to identify measurable outcomes and identify those that will be measured next school year. So the third phase of the pilot is officially July 1st, 2021 through June 30th of 2022. They're going to help us with calendaring. So each of the different agencies, we're going to work backwards from that June 30th, 2022 fiscal year date and identify those key action items and deadlines that will enable success. So those attending tomorrow in the facilitated planning for this third phase of the pilot include representatives from the Governor's Office, Vijay, Keith Line, Region 4, Stacy Smith, KSDE, Mike Bean, Department of Commerce, Scott Smathers and April Henry, Board of Regents, Angela Berlin, Department of Labor. I mentioned Jack Porter and Rachel Hirsch from NGA, myself, KSDE, Chastity Troxel, the Program Manager for Apprenticeships in Kansas, and Jean Clifford, State Board of Education member. So part of that work and dating back to 2018 was coming together. You can see the agencies represented across the bottom. We agreed upon a Kansas work-based learning definition. We felt it was important that it be a K-12 continuum of awareness, exploration, and preparation that combines an individual's career goals, structured learning, and authentic work experiences, implemented through a sustained partnership with Kansas business and industry. Those work-based learning activities with industry or community professionals culminate in a validation and measurement of acquired knowledge, skills, and possible employment. So this was one of the outcomes of our first collaboration with NGA and cross-agency partnership, and it led to the Kansas Work-Based Learning Continuum. So I'm hoping as you heard that definition, you can see that career awareness beginning as early as pre-K and elementary, career exploration in middle school, and career preparation in high school. What we've heard from our Governor's Council on Education, Work-Based Learning and Market Value Asset Committee is how important it is to have those market value assets that could include that high quality internship, perhaps regionally vetted youth registered apprenticeship, an entrepreneurial experience, as well as college credits and industry recognized credentials that may be identified through these work-based learning experiences. And this top bullet is indicative of the individual plan of study. In Kansas, every accredited district has an individual plan of study for students grades 8 through 12. And we have presented on how, excuse me, work-based learning can inform the individual plan of study, especially when started early as elementary. We want to bring in to view the career and technical student organizations because work-based learning, employability skills and technical skills can also be demonstrated through CTSO experiences. So the documents that we referred to, the Kansas Work-Based Learning Personalized Learning Plan, we released this in 2019. The Work-Based Learning Digital Reference Guide was the guide that we utilized in the professional development that we provided in 2020, in both the spring and the fall. This will be updated each year. It will include information from the different agencies that are participating in this initiative, and it will be a guide or a resource for work-based learning in our state. I'm going to show you some of those resources. Again, I put the link to the Google Drive in the chat bar. You may also scan this QR code, and the PowerPoint presentation is also in the Google Drive. But I wanted to show you what some of these resources look like and some of the ones that I have spoke about. So this is the work-based learning model policy component that we utilized as a guide. We consulted with the Education Commission of States in 2019 prior to completing the full real-world ready work-based learning recommendations that you'll find in the folder. They recommended that our plan to ensure high school students statewide have equitable access to high-quality work-based learning, to prepare them for post-secondary and workforce success in high-demand occupations in the region and state, that the comprehensive policy approach should include these components. So I'm not going to read through all of these, but I wanted to let you know why we included the components in the plan that we did. The state and regional coordination. And you'll notice it says specifically establishment of state or regional intermediaries, which is the model that we have proposed. Those access components, high quality career awareness and exploration beginning in elementary and middle grades. The financial aspects, program quality, making sure they're high quality. So some of the documents that we have provided, and I'll show to you to help ensure that. And then graduation credit for approved work-based learning experiences are all included in the plan. I'm not going to go through the entire document, but again, it is in the Google Drive, as well as this document. I want to show you that this is here. This is research that we conducted on each of those components. So you'll see the components, our anticipated struggles, and the real world ready recommendations. Initially, it was recommended to establish a work-based learning coordinating council, but at this time, of course, it is the Advantage Kansas Coordinating Council. And we go into those model policy components that we spoke about. So I'd encourage you to read through the entire plan. We did reference and research other states and what they were doing in each of these components that we felt best reflected what we were doing here in Kansas. We looked at Delaware. We looked at Iowa. They have an intermediary network, and many of their measurables and deliverables are what we proposed that we measure because we felt it was most like the regional intermediary network that we were proposing. So following the meeting with Education Commission of States, they gave us feedback on those specific components. We met with Governor Kelly in January of 2020. Stacy Smith, Commissioner Watson, myself, Vijay was there. We summarized our work-based learning real world ready paper into these model policy components. Again, you'll see the state and regional coordination. So bringing all of the resources from our different agencies together, promoting a K-12 work-based learning continuum, and developing that state strategic plan for work-based learning to align the systems to promote the regional collaboration. As you'll see, we have developed the regional intermediary networks. We're going to show you the Department of Labor work-based learning liability fact sheet and the framework that we have proposed. Promoting teacher participation in high quality training. Again, this was the work-based learning digital reference guide and the training that we had in which we brought in all of those different agencies. We did speak with the governor in regards to sustainability, and we shared with her our measurable outcomes. So I'd encourage you to look at this briefing, which does summarize the full real world ready work-based learning recommendations. And the measurables and timeline, Alex is going to go over those in more detail, but I do have that document in the folder also. We talked a little bit about the tools that were action items that we developed. The American Institute for Research, they reviewed the literature in other states to help us develop work-based learning electronic experience portfolio. We wanted to make sure that the work-based learning experiences we were recommending were high quality. And I'd encourage you to look at this in further detail. We went through and decided that we were going to encourage students 8th through 11th grade to have a growth portfolio, and in that 12th grade year, creation of a graduation portfolio. So we have recommended components of that do include work-based learning experience work samples and those business and mentor evaluations. If districts choose to score what students place in their portfolios, we give recommendations on that so that when those seniors have their graduation portfolio, they can score these and they can determine what gaps exist for those students or if high quality work-based learning experiences are in place for students. We developed a reflection sheet so as students place artifacts in their portfolio of their work-based learning experiences, they could reflect on those, specifically those employability skills that the State Board of Education and the listening tour that our commissioner embarked upon said were important. We developed an employability skills self-assessment. The framework is modeled off the U.S. Department of Education Employability Skills Framework. And we developed an employability skills rubric so that the students and those evaluating the students would be on the same page as to whether their employability skills were emerging, developing, proficient, or exemplary. This document was released in 2018. In 2019, we released the Kansas Work-Based Learning Professionalized Learning Plan. This was one of our cross-agency goals. I referenced Mike Bean, but he felt it was important to have digital fillable forms that would be the same for business and industry. We've talked a lot about definitions, and also within this document, we have the graphic of the work-based learning continuum, and we have brief definitions for every experience that we have identified on the continuum. We had a meeting with superintendents. The superintendent said it would be helpful when they met with their insurance companies to have definitions of these experiences. So they are included, those definitions, within this document. We also, based upon the type of work-based learning experience, have sections that are recommended or required for completion. We'll take just a brief look at those. So these are digital fillable forms. That initial work-based learning agreement needs to be in place for all students. This is the section that we're asking worksite supervisors and adult mentors to complete. It does include an employability skills assessment as well as a technical skill feedback assessment. So this employability skills assessment will look similar to the one that we released in 2018. It's a digital fillable form, and it does link to that rubric so that students can be evaluated. This is the technical skills feedback. So we're asking that business and industry educator and student evaluate at least 8 competencies in regards to those technical skills. Section 3 is for the student, and it is an employability skills self-assessment. That reflection sheet so they can upload artifacts from their work-based learning experiences into their electronic portfolio, and then that technical skills self-assessment. Section 4 has supplemental documents depending on the type of work-based learning experience the students engaged in, including a safety training log, a work-based learning liability agreement. And we aren't saying that this form has to be completed. We're recommending that each local district have an agreement of this type in place. This is essential that students fill this out and have on record, and they're completed at least daily and then turned into the school weekly to make sure that it's a high quality experience and it ties back to those technical and employability skills goals. So what type of work is completed? So that is the document that we created and released in 2019. And this is the Work-Based Learning Digital Reference Guide that we released in July of 2020. We have updated it twice since then. I'm just going to briefly show you what's here. We did utilize it in our training and helped guide our training. Along the right, let's see, I have a question. And feel free to speak up and let me know if I need to respond to a question as I go along. But we were asked about definitions of these different experiences. So you'll see that we have very detailed definitions of career awareness, exploration, and preparation, as well as labor laws from the Department of Labor and US Department of Labor. So I'm just going to show you, and we had summary definitions in the prior document, but this document actually goes through the steps for career preparation, those high quality application level experiences that must be met. So a student must keep an electronic portfolio. The student must have had background technical skill courses or courses related to their experience prior to being placed. The coordinator will meet weekly to identify those work log records are in place. They'll visit the work site at least every 9 weeks. The work experience will be aligned to those students' career goals and individual plan of study. That they'll keep, we just looked at the Kansas Work-Based Learning Personalized Learning Plan documents, so those forms will be filled out and placed in their electronic portfolio. So this is a very detailed guide. We do go into a lot more detail on internship for districts or those getting started. Entrepreneurial application level experiences. Those health science clinical experiences, service learning, and the roles of the coordinator, the student, and the business and industry partner. School-based enterprise or simulated work-based experiences, and youth registered apprenticeships. We defer to the Department of Commerce, and there is a link here to the Youth Registered Apprenticeship fact sheet that explains that in further detail. I wanted to show you, Stacy's going to talk about this in more detail, but we do have a one-page work-based learning fact sheet that was prepared by Justin McFarland when he was at the Department of Labor. We also had the U.S. Department of Labor share in our work-based learning coordinator training. These are all of the resources they said would be very important for those placing students to be familiar with. The Department of Labor has also provided detailed spreadsheets for every workforce region as well as statewide, high demand, high wage occupations that are sortable by cluster and pathway. And we feel these are user-friendly for educators and parents. So I'd encourage you to explore that resource further. And those are the resources that we have prepared. One other item, and I know that you all have received, we were asked several questions when the Advantage Kansas Coordinating Council began. And I've placed this document dated April 9th, 2021 into the Google folder. But we were asked to answer the question, in Kansas, how many districts are providing experiences, career awareness experiences specifically? And when we conducted the 2020 IPS survey, 88.5% of districts responded and said 61.9% of students, we don't have the total number of students, but 61.9% of districts are providing career awareness experiences. That's at elementary level. Middle school level, 45.2% of districts responded saying students had career exploration experiences. And those high quality career preparation application level experiences, 31.7%. And it goes into detail on those specific experiences we had noted across the continuum and breaks it down even further in this document. One thing I did want to touch on is in career and technical education, those application level courses. We looked at the information for that time period, and approximately we have 35,535 students in 11th grade and about 34,500 in 12th grade. We had 20,814 students enrolled in application level courses across the 37 pathways. We summarize that by career fields. So you can see that about 29% of students were in those high quality CTE programs. And that aligns with 31.7% of districts who responded saying students have those high quality career preparation experiences. I'm not going to go into it today, but I want to let you know that each of the districts involved in our cross-agency regional pilot, they submitted an inventory in regards to their individual plan of study and their work-based learning experiences. So we ask each of those districts what career awareness experiences were being provided, the count of students who participated in them, and what career field they were within. We also asked them in middle school, what is the count, the number of students participating in career exploration, and which of the 16 career clusters are those experienced in? And career preparation. Of the 37 pathways, the number of students in each of those specific preparations. So I'd encourage you to look at those further. And I'm going to get back to the PowerPoint now and talk to you a little bit about the pilot, where we're at now, and then turn it over to the others that are on the call to help today.
Natalie, I have one quick question.
Sure.
In terms of you're tracking the students and where their experiences were and what their fields that they worked in, do we have any longitudinal tracking going on for maybe those high school students? Are they going into higher education in the fields of study that we would expect that are aligned with the career fields, or are they not?
Well, Stacy, do you want to speak on that question?
We don't have any formal longitudinal studies or really any data that we can refer to until as such a time as we've got support from the legislature to merge some data systems. When you look at student privacy information, making those connections is particularly difficult based upon legislation that has been passed to protect student information. Anecdotally, we could look at some information from Nebraska and South Dakota, who recently conducted a study on longitudinal information around CTE students. That was completed by the Midwest REL, and Mark Broderson was the author of that. We did try to participate in that study with them and come up with the kind of data that you're talking about. But we just can't do that based upon state laws. So that would be a great thing for the legislature to request and endorse, and we would love to provide that longitudinal information.
Thanks, Stacy.
And I have a comment and then a question, and that was one of the things that we've talked about this week at AKCC was related to that data, longitudinal data, some of the problems with that. But I think it just makes sense, and the legislature is putting so much money into the Excel and CTE program. One would think we could get some support for, if nothing else, the caveat that if the students want the money, they need to sign that data sharing agreement that would then allow us to see what did you go on or did you go on to study. So I think that there's the opportunity to begin to get that longitudinal study in place. I had just a quick question looking at one of the slides there toward the end that you were showing, Natalie, where it had number of students in the different CTE pathways, and one of them is the media and technology. With course codes and things that I know KSDE, I think, has access to some that enrollment information, specifically what classes the kids are in. Do you think we would be able to drill deeper into the pathway to see what would actually be part of the IT work that we're starting to narrow our focus on? Because some of those media classes aren't really going to be what meets the definition of the IT that we're thinking is going to expand the economy. Is that possible to drill down into that?
So Stacy, feel free to join me, but when we do pathway reviews, we can see the districts, how many districts are offering those courses. And then Stacy, do you want to respond to the count of students that are taking those courses?
Yeah, that would be a data request that we could fill, particularly if you're going to look at computer science through the lens of say, AP computer science. We have course code enrollment information, and we can tell you how many students are taking that particular strand of a pathway. And so we do separate programming and software development, network systems, as well as information support services separately from the web and digital communications. And so we can get more granular around that information. I would have to go back and look and talk to Dr. Stephen King, but I would assume some of that information has been presented already to the state board. We ought to be able to tap into that pretty quickly for you.
So it seems like that might be a path forward for us, as if we want to put an emphasis on IT as our starting point, with knowing we'll expand to others later. But identifying which specific courses, that would make it really clear so people know this is what we're talking about, versus some other course that, yes, it's technology, but it's not IT. We had conversation yesterday that we want to make sure somebody doesn't think, oh, I'm learning how to use Excel. That's IT. Not
Yeah,
quite.
and I think coordinating our data with post-secondary data institutions as well would probably be effective, because I think most of the jobs that you're probably talking about are going to require some kind of post-secondary certificate to continue in as well. And then there's an Excel and CTE slice that overlaps with secondary and post-secondary.
And I want to say, Natalie, thank you for sharing all of those wonderful documents and really bringing them up on the screen and making us look at what's there. Hopefully that encourages all of us to take that deeper dive still into that Google folder that you've shared, which I have, while you were talking, downloaded so that I can make sure it actually gets into the larger AKCC resources, so that even more of us know that it's there and can see it.
Okay, very good. There is also, and I know that Alex and Keith will add to this, the work-based learning intermediary job description that was also requested. And I wanted to mention too, on the IT, one resource that we have found very helpful when we do our pathway review is to reach out to Angela Berland, and sometimes Emily Dirksen is the one who reports based upon our pathway and our courses. She aligns the short-term, long-term, and job openings and those occupational codes that are represented in the courses and pathways that we have. And that is a really helpful resource when we're communicating it to our educators. So now I wanted to take just a little bit of time, and we talked about the pilots that began in 2020. We broke our state down into the existing 5 workforce regions. The partners that you see, Kansas State Department of Education, each region has an educational program consultant helping in this network. The Kansas Department of Commerce, they budgeted from January 2020 through June 30th, 2021 to start work-based learning intermediaries. So the Workforce Center, or the workforce boards in each region, serves as that regional work-based learning intermediary. So they've been connecting education, business and industry, and economic development in the region. And the work-based learning intermediary coordinates work-based learning experiences for those students in the districts you see, in partnership with the district work-based learning coordinator. And there's a district work-based learning coordinator identified in each district. The Kansas Board of Regents has identified a community and/or technical college partner for each of these pilots. And the Department of Labor has provided labor market information statewide, as well as regionally, that's sorted by career cluster and/or pathway for educators, students, and parents. And I want to highlight that those intermediaries are housed at the Workforce Center or those local workforce boards. And you can see our partners, and they are displayed here on the screen, working with each of those districts. So we have 5 pilots. However, in Region 5, Iola and Chanute are working together for the pilot in Region 5. So I want to say that in 2019-2020, The Governor's Education Council recommended that work-based learning in Kansas should be implemented as a comprehensive policy approach as outlined from the Education Commission of States Work-Based Learning Model Policy Components to ensure all Kansas students, no matter where they are located in the state, have access to high-quality work-based learning experiences designed to prepare each student for post-secondary and workforce success in high-wage, high-demand, critical need occupations in our state and regions. So ensuring equitable access to work-based learning, we feel will tie high-demand, high-wage, critical need jobs in Kansas and provide that talent pipeline necessary to fill jobs and drive the Kansas economy. The phase 1 pilot districts we see here, Hugoton, Manhattan, DeSoto, Circle, Iola, and Chanute. The phase 2 pilot districts are listed. They joined at the beginning of last school year. Those districts in bold are also redesigned schools, and we purposely made sure that the 4 redesign principles were crosswalked in our strategies for scaling high-quality work-based learning. And Stacy's going to tell you a little bit more further in the presentation, but this next school year, actually beginning this summer, our goal is to have 10 additional districts. So that will be approximately 10% of the 286 districts in Kansas that will be engaged in the work-based learning intermediary cross-agency pilot. And so at this time, I am going to welcome Alex Kofod, and he is going to tell you about the intermediaries in the different regions.
Thanks, Natalie. Again, my name is Alex Kofod. I serve as the Youth Employment Manager for Workforce Alliance of South Central Kansas, and then also serve as the work-based learning intermediary for Region 4. As you can see on your screen there, we have the 5 different regions. Region 1, we have Kristen Doze. Region 2, we have Monty Enright. Region 3 is Sloan Gage. Region 4, myself. And then Region 5, we have Tina Friend. So in the next slide here, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the expected outcomes and deliverables. I'm not going to go too far in depth because I want to share with you some of the best practices and then also how we're working together in order to reach these outcomes and deliverables. So in this next one, it's kind of broken down, but basically, as Natalie said before, we work as a liaison between the educators and also the businesses in order to provide those work-based learning experiences. We also use a database in terms of, we use Zello, which I'll also go into depth further in the presentation, as our database also highlight and show those work-based learning experiences. So we work very closely with work-based learning coordinators within our region, but then also the intermediaries also work together to show some form of cohesiveness so that we can provide those work-based learning experiences and opportunities statewide, as well as working with our colleges as well. So I'll jump into some of our best practices to kind of highlight exactly how we meet some of those measurables and outcomes. As I said before, I'm with Region 4. I'm sure some of you have already heard about the Youth Employment Project. We have over 1,800 students that are involved with that. Before COVID, we were close to about 3,000 students. Students register for the Youth Employment Project, and then they are exposed to work-based learning and job opportunities. And the way that is done is our communication within the school districts. We're using Zello, but then there's also a monthly newsletter that goes out with those opportunities. Part of that communication process is also getting to the parents as well, who are also are going to be primarily effective in order to get those students involved in those opportunities. Part of the Youth Employment Project, we also encourage and we have them sign up for an essential skills training in which it's a 6-hour training. When they're done, they receive an essential skills certificate. That certificate, when annotated on their resume, our partner employers will put them at the top of the list. This is strictly only in Region 4. This is something that we would hope to be able to push and have go statewide and possibly have it signed by the governor. Is something that I would dream about to have happen. We have nearly 700 employed. Those numbers also include our partners that we work with. So when you see there, it says Camp HYPE. HYPE stands for Helping Youth Prepare for Employment. That's under an umbrella. We work side by side with the City of Wichita with their Way to Work program, the YMCA Job Prep, and then us as well with the Youth Employment Project. So those total employed numbers also include their employed. Camp HYPE, as you see there, those are career camps in which the students are exposed directly to those employers. So kind of piggybacking on what Shelley was saying when she's talking about the technology, we actually ran a technology camp this year. We did trade skills, we did Textron aviation, we did healthcare, and currently this week we are doing Spirit Aerosystems. So what happens is those students come in and they are taught curriculum with our 4 high school externs provided by USD 259. They go through the soft skills training, and then they also go through presentations from the employers who talk about the career paths they took to get to where they are at. And then they talk about those different career opportunities that are within their companies and their industries. So it's another way that we can be vital to them in ensuring that they are being exposed to those pathways, and then also understanding that there are jobs and there are career opportunities within our state and local areas. Some of the other ones that I want to highlight as well is Building Bridges, which is in Region 1. There with Building Bridges, basically what they do is they expose their region is exposed to with the educators, the students, and the workforce work together in order to provide some form of work-based learning opportunities for the students in the area. So they run that event, I believe once a year, if that's correct, Natalie.
Yes.
In the next regions, Region 3 and 5, they both developed and created and implemented internships within their region with the school districts and also some of the high schools. So I just wanted to kind of highlight a little bit about what they were doing in there. So you can see on your screen here with USD 232, and on the next one in Iola, they also were able to create real world experiences with the students in which they were getting hands-on training and internships in order to further build up that pathway. Natalie, did you have something you want to jump in and say?
No.
All right, just want to make sure. And so, like I said, in Region 3 and 5, they've been very successful in order to build those up. And then, like I was saying earlier, there is a database that we do use in which we are trying to further expand those opportunities. And so that platform is called Zello. So it promotes the organization, it shares their experiences that they have, and then also offers the work-based learning opportunities. We currently have over 180 companies that are involved across the state. So again, when we're talking about that cohesiveness amongst the intermediaries, we are all working together to get these companies involved with Zello. This is free for them. One of the ways that we've been very successful in doing that is the local chambers have been vital in order to get those companies together in one setting. And then the intermediaries can come in and speak to all of them across the board about what Zello does and what we are trying to do with this initiative of work-based learning in order to get our talent pool within the local area exposed to all the opportunities that are here within the state. So in a nutshell, that's what Zello is, but I wanted to offer for Keith if he needed to jump in and if there's something I missed that he wanted to add.
Yeah, I think you covered things pretty nicely. I think the only thing to add is this is a great example of how we're leveraging partners together for a common cause. By having the workforce boards help support the schools in this role, we're already in this space with our normal operations, day-to-day operations. So it just makes a lot of sense to have us be part of expanding this work-based learning opportunity. And again, it's a great way to leverage resources together from different funding streams for a common cause. So I appreciate the work that Alex has done and all my partners across the state. So.
Thanks, Keith. So at this time, I'm just going to turn it over to Stacy Smith, and he's going to talk about the liability and sustainability.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to start out with a little disclaimer. I'm not a member of the legal bar or any other bar in particular, and I don't have an insurance certificate. So we're pretty good at talking to people, getting a consensus, and then providing some guidance to school districts. But liability is certainly a very real concern. As Natalie mentioned, we've provided guidance and training to schools in the fall and the spring of 2020. And we've had experts directly there in front of school members, including KASB, Rod Spangler, and then the U.S. Department of Labor. We were not able to record those and make those available because of the U.S. Department of Labor's standards for recorded videos. But they're happy to jump on a call with us and go through legal concerns and the law around fair labor standards at any time. And we're happy to convene those meetings. They're really great to work with and very supportive. We are interested in getting together work-based learning training for the fall of 2021, probably looking at a virtual training opportunity. And we will be coming up with dates for that we will release at the Kansas Association for Career and Technical Educators Conference that will be in Manhattan, Kansas on July 26th and 27th, where we will be providing work-based learning training to school districts, particularly CTE leaders who will be going over the broad strokes of what we hope to accomplish with the Scaling Work-Based Learning pilot. Natalie mentioned we are adding 10 additional districts, and we'll make those formal announcements July 26th as we finish up the grant writing process. We do have a host of partners in the work-based learning space, particularly the Kaufman schools that are part of the Real World Learning Initiative there. And then, of course, Wichita USD 259 is not on our work-based learning grantee list, but they are a very, very strong partner in creating opportunities for students. I did a scan very recently and looked at 3 insurance policies that urban school districts have that are very detailed and outline the liability concerns and provide a safety net for their students and clear definitions for the business and school responsibilities. And I think those are great things to have in place for a sense of, I don't want to say comfort, but assurance that you're doing things right for your kids and that they're protected. I think the insurance liability has been a point of contention based upon Senate Bill 91 that'll be probably in discussions throughout the course of the year. My understanding of the legislation is that it's really about paid versus unpaid internships. Those students that are placed at Textron Aviation and are receiving a wage while they're there will be continue to be covered by the employer workman's compensation policies with clear understanding that paid internships will continue to be covered as they have been in the past by workers' compensation. Those unpaid internships are the ones where you really need a good understanding of what the training program is. Natalie went through some of the documents that can help create that and provide a vehicle for language with the insurance agents that are representing you. Wichita, Olathe, Shawnee Mission, I recently scanned their insurance policies, and they're very clear about the career awareness opportunities that are covered. You know, a field trip is covered like any other field trip. A job shadow, you want to clearly define what functions the student will be performing within the workplace and clarify what their responsibilities are while they're there. So the definitions that we have in place around the responsibilities of internships and the work performed are very clear. And our work-based learning intermediaries are exceptional convening partners when you get together with insurance agents and school legal district attorneys to discuss the coverage. So our function as a state agency is to bring people together, clarify the steps and the procedures, the elements of the training program that you need to have in place that are aligned with the business expectations, particularly safety training in some trades. The Fair Labor Standards Act does have a list of exempted student learner programs where they can perform hazardous occupations below the age of 18 if they have been through the safety training. So just got to understand that meat slicing equipment is a little bit different than a Word document if you're an intern for a graphics company or Excel spreadsheet in an accounting firm. So understanding the particular occupational track and the safety prerequisites. You know, if we're going to step into the space of IT and cybersecurity, then understanding ethics and the importance of firewalls and privileged information and what you can and cannot post on social media about the information that you see is pretty important for that intern to understand. Keith and I talked a little bit this morning, and I've waded into the subject, and I don't know if this addresses everybody's concerns, but a real partnership around work-based learning involves the school, whether that's a secondary or post-secondary institution, the business, legal consultation, and sometimes, as Keith was discussing with me this morning, an intermediary who can assist with some of those liability coverages. I think in Wichita, they utilize Manpower as a third-party employer that is able to take over some aspects of the paid internship opportunities that the business might not feel comfortable covering outright. So I guess that's a spot for you to step in, Keith. Any other concerns that you'd like to share with the group? I think we need to get people together this fall in specific training that drills down into the subjects that superintendents and principals and regional intermediaries are concerned about with scaling students in paid internship opportunities.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple quick comments. And again, one of the reasons that we're at the table so enthusiastically is that as a workforce board, we started doing summer jobs a while back and really recognizing two key components to a successful and sustainable summer jobs program was the involvement of the business community and to tie summer job potentials to academic interest. And that's where you can really get a system that makes sense for your community. You can get buy-in from the community. And so we've been doing this since around, in a more sophisticated way, actually targeting the career piece of it since about 2016, 2018. And again, Stacy mentioned the manpower element. When we would go to some of these businesses and we'd say, could you provide an internship for a high school kid? The liability is the piece that shied them away. When we're able to say, but we can hire them through manpower, we made it easy for that employer to participate. Now, not every employer needs that third-party buffer, so to speak. And, you know, we went from the first year we did this with Textron, I think it was 2018, they hired 6 interns. They're now up to 100 interns on their payroll in their system. So when we were talking about expanding, you know, using the work-based learning during the school year, our hope is that we can take the lessons learned from placing high school kids in summer jobs and apply that into this systematic work-based learning system across the state. And again, recognizing the accounting firm that brings in an intern, you know, they might need a different type of agreement, a different type of job structure than your local auto repair shop that maybe bring in an intern. But we want to provide opportunities for both kinds of businesses to where we can help that young person really discover their passion, their interest to help grow on their academic goals and long-term career aspirations. So again, it makes a lot of sense. You know, I think, Shelley, you mentioned the funding around the career and Excel, the Excel and career and technical education, excuse me. But, you know, we're also looking to complement those previous investments through this work-based learning strategy. How do we tie all this together to have a really systematic approach to academic success and career awareness for our high school students and our business and industry in Kansas?
This may be too simple of a question, but Stacy, I think I hear you saying you're not convinced that we need legislation. Others are still concerned. We need further conversation to decide if legislation is actually needed or not. Is that what I'm hearing?
I have no problem with the legislation that's coming out. And if it gets it in front of business and industries, and we begin to talk about solutions around specific definitions, that's not a bad thing, right? I mean, the last time I checked, I think the national statistics are something like, when you and I were growing up, 70% of us had a summer job and exposure to the workplace. And currently we're closer to 30% participation by teenagers in some kind of a job. If the economy is a big deal, and I think it is, and if we want to create a really fertile environment for business to grow and develop and people to engage in making their communities better, then, you know, I think we have to swing for the fence. And if this legislation gets people talking about it, then it's not a bad thing. I'm not opposed to it at all. I don't think it's a significant game changer. When we're talking about internships, you know, I think we're talking about a small number of our 35,000 students that are going to be a part of a paid opportunity in the very near future. So I think it's achievable. If Textron went from 6 to 100, that's a huge jump, and it's fantastic for their pipeline. I don't know what the peak is of the number of internships that they could absorb, or in each of our work-based learning regions or in each of our communities, what that exact total is. I don't think we're looking at covering liability insurance for 35,000 students. You know, if we could get to a number of 10%, I think it would be an astronomical increase if we were covering liability for 3,500 kids. What I think scares people out of the conversations are talking about field trips and liability around field trips, or career mentoring, or in some of our smaller schools, a principal who's really doesn't have time to dig into fair labor standards and understand what they're committing to. Or they might not have a template to help formalize the legal agreement that would cover that student. The sophistication of our work-based learning placements at the internship level are pretty significant. And so how small schools can group together around their consortia or in various pools to maintain the high quality and legitimate insurance liability coverage is a nuance of the overall conversation. A lot of these things, like the supervised agricultural experience is not up there, but that can take place outside of school. That could take place in a research format, or it could take place on the family farm, and they can still develop those competencies, but it really wouldn't meet the level of insurance liability concern. So when we talk about work-based learning, we're talking about a whole lot. And so if we could come down to an internship and just settle on the internship, and this is what you have to do for an internship, I think that will put school leaders at ease, and then it will help with the development of those legal agreements and the final insurance liability coverage. And it's going to require multiple conversations over a period of time for a district leader to get up to speed with the amount of information that Natalie just put up there in front of us. There's a lot to cover.
Thanks for that. The bill last year was a millisecond, literally a millisecond from getting dumped into a bill that would have passed, and somebody at the last minute asked for it not to be put in. And so what I would just request is for all partners, I've had someone on the bigger Governor's Education Council ask me about this as well, maybe just communication about that bill, if it's needed, if it needs changes or amendments. I think there are people who are willing to help do that, but the time to talk about that's now, not when we're in the crazy time of throwing bills, you know, together at the last second. So anything we can do to help.
Heather, let me jump in real quick. And yeah, you're spot on. And Representative Tarwater has been the champion of that legislation. We've met with him a couple of times, so there are ongoing conversations right now. He actually drove down to Wichita a couple of weeks ago, and he was in the room with USD 259, our local Chamber of Commerce, several other local legislators. So talking about this piece, he's very open to conversations about it. And I recently, during the reorganization of the Governor's Education Council, me and Adrian Howie are now co-chairing the Work-Based Learning Task Force. And this is one of our priorities, is to kind of figure out what's needed in that legislation. How do we back that? What are the vehicles? So yeah, you're just spot on. This is the time we're having that conversation now. And I hope to be able to bring something back to this group and the Governor's Education Council by the time they meet in late August.
Yeah, and I think people get frustrated when somebody comes in late in the conversation and tries to throw a wet blanket on things. So, you know, I'm ready to springboard in. If it does pass, what do we do? What are the steps? How do we set up insurance pools for school districts so they can look at some form of self-coverage? Is there a small element of the student learner information that could be included in worker compensation statutes that would make it easier to create those pools? Or is that even a real obstacle? Can they create those pools already? You know, I think it's relatively easy for, and I shouldn't say easy, it's achievable for Wichita to walk into a conversation with their attorney and work out how their insurance coverage is going to happen, because they do it at scale. And so that's a little bit harder in Hugoton. They're going to need some partners to complete that. And so even if it's just a small regional or 5-county group that pools together and gets that self-coverage in place, it becomes even more achievable. But like I said, I can be a wet blanket, and I don't want to create problems where there are not problems. We need to convene regionally and work out the next steps.
Thank you both.
Just a wondering and a question, as we've heard all this information, and it has been so great. Thank you so much for helping us take the time to take a deeper dive into this. Stacy and Natalie, so within the context of what I shared about AKCC believing we need to go forward in a more focused manner for something that we can get Jumpstart, Talent Ready, and Opportunity Kansas all on the same page moving forward, something that's manageable for us. Do you see anything that would be a hurdle on work-based learning, kind of taking that piece to lead the way of taking it to scale as a way to then lifting everything else to scale? Is that a good thing, a bad thing? You know, what's your reaction to that? How do we work with that?
So the pathways that are in place for funding for next year, the deadline to apply for those, we have a window from November 15th to March 15th. So those schools that are participating have their pathways as far as their courses and their curriculum. Not that they couldn't start to work on those initiatives, about the timeline for funding and the calendar in which the pathways are approved.
And we're committed to our work-based learning intermediaries for this portion of our Perkins grants for FY22. But certainly we can look at a significant investment of Perkins resources to scale particular pathways. And so
that's really kind of where my question is leading, is that possible to help put emphasis there?
Yep.
It didn't seem to me that it undid any of the work you were doing, but you may see it differently.
Well, and that could be a portion of our convening with the National Governors Association tomorrow, is to talk about blending and braiding efforts so that, you know, the secondary level feeds into the post-secondary level, feeds into the Workforce Development Board's vision for WIOA, so that at least we've got some of those incentive dollars that are all rowing in the same direction to connect systems, you know, rather than solely focusing on a conversation that might be around defunding, but how do we push the gas pedal on the things that we really want to accelerate? Because I don't want to lose a lot of lost time in bickering conversations. I just want to establish the priority, use the immediate vehicles, and then we can work on systemic change with a little bit more time to make the implementation comfortable for school districts.
I like that. And as I was thinking about this the other day, and then Natalie helped drive that home in my head with the continuum slide, the awareness, the exploration, and the preparation. And, you know, at least my experience where I see districts around me really struggling is making that connection to work-based learning and what does awareness look like? What does exploration look like? And maybe we could, as you say, how do we hit the gas pedal to really help connect some dots with IT in that area, using that as a model that then districts would say, oh, and we did it with IT. So now here's the next pathway that we'll choose to begin to do that with, that it might really create that visual for teachers and administration to go, oh, light bulb, that's what we're talking about. That's what this can look like. Here's how we do this. I also really liked, while of course there are, you know, issues with FERPA and data privacy that and all the ethics that we have to be careful about, every single school district has a need for IT. So there's opportunity right there for an internship experience potentially in every single school district. So, you know, in my mind, I thought this makes a lot of sense to me, but it doesn't mean it makes sense to everyone else. So I just want to make sure that as we go forward, we're doing this in a way that, as you say, we're talking about lifting something up, not at the expense of something else, but how could we then potentially use this as the model that gives everybody the visual of, okay, well, we did that, and now what's the next piece and the next piece, that it doesn't slow anything else down.
And I just shared the Department of Labor for each region has those occupation titles, and they have long-term, short-term, and then rankings. They can do it in even more detailed report, but I think this would be really important to share. Both, this is, for example, local area 1, and there's different spreadsheets for each statewide.
Natalie, is that, when you say you shared that, is that in that Google folder?
Yes, within that work-based learning digital reference guide, I can show you the link for that. Department of Labor has been updating that yearly in January, and I'll show you where that's at. But it's in the digital reference guide on page numbered 73, and you can click on the link, and it will take you to their website. And there's a Tableau site, but down at the bottom, you can look at statewide or by local area region. So if you want to look at local area 2, and you would open the Excel file, you could specifically look at IT, and it would show you in local area 2 those occupational titles. They show high demand. If it's high wage and high demand, it is a darker shade of blue and has the check mark. And so I think this would be a tool. And again, I know that Emily Dirksen could even give us a more detailed report if we just wanted to focus on IT.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think this begins to get us that information that we need as we really begin to move forward, getting that clear vision. All right, if this is where we're going now, how do we all pool our resources so we're all rowing in the same direction, so to speak? And I think we can gain a lot of ground very quickly. So I think this is exciting. I feel like we're finally beginning to get some traction here with what we're doing and talking about. Any other questions or comments from those who tuned in?
Well, just one quick point, Shelley, I think you're right in terms of we really ought to be focused this in terms of critical need, sector-based, you know, so again, whether it's IT, I think that would help customize it per region. It really helps justify the investment of both resources and any additional financial investment. I think it'll help the business community understand their role and their impact and helping to come alongside our educational partners. So yeah, I think as far as, so eventually we'll want to involve as many employers as possible, but keeping it focused on key sectors, key occupations, I think really helps the intermediaries, helps again the local businesses really recognize where they can engage.
Yeah, I think, was it 3 years ago, Keith, you and I met over at Commerce with Mike Bean and started talking about this project. And, and I get to see Keith probably every other month, and we're on a check-in call with Alex monthly. We've got a lot of post-secondary partners that jump into those work-based learning discussions. If anybody wants to be a part of the cohort on our monthly calls around work-based learning, just send Natalie and I an email, and we can get you on a list, and we can set up a Zoom link for you to be a part of those check-ins and look at progress. So really excited about the potential of this year. There's a lot of momentum coming out of COVID, a lot of attention to the concerns that we share. And it's going to take a lot of work to see it through, but I think we've got the group together that will make that work happen. So thank you much for the opportunity to share our understandings today.
All right, everyone, thank you very much for joining us. I do want to remind you that if you're available, we have another opportunity on the 19th for some additional learning. We'll hear from Dan Whistler is going to talk a bit more about certifications that are available. I know there are definitely some of those that can tie in with this IT focus. So we'll be really interested to hear from him. We'll have Bill Nicely talking about real world learning and the Kauffman Foundation and their experiences that they've had there partnering with business and industry. So I think that's just another piece to add to this as we learn about the success that they've been having, particularly in the Kansas City area and over on the Missouri side of things. So I hope you're able to tune in. That meeting starts at 10. So thank you for joining us today. Everybody have a great rest of your day.